everyone, welcome to Cottoverdi. My name's Annette and I garden here in South Buckinghamshire in the UK in the glorious Chiltern Hills. We have a lovely old walled garden and a very old property, and every year I sow loads of seeds, and I like to bring you along whilst I'm sowing those seeds so I can show you how I sow them, what I'm sowing and the results of those sowings. So I always do updates on my seedlings and then show you what they look like in the garden. So if that would interest you, then do subscribe to my channel. It'd be lovely to have you along. And obviously I've got a whole backlog of videos that you can go through showing you how to sow seeds in the past and the results of those seed sowings. I also grow loads of dahlias every year, and I love to do comparisons between those dahlias. So if you're interested in dahlias, another good reason to subscribe. In today's video, I am sowing loads of different umbellifers. Umbellifers are those gorgeous flowers that look a bit like what we call cow parsley. So they've got very flat flower heads. They've got very flat flower heads, normally made up of lots of tiny little flowers, very much like cow parsley. So I'm going to be sowing a few of those. Now, the reasons that I'm sowing them are firstly because they look beautiful and whimsical, and I think they really add a very lovely country vibe to a cottage garden, and I do have a very English cottage garden feel in my garden. The other reason that I'm growing them is because they attract loads of beneficial insects. It's a really good spot for the bees and butterflies and flies to land because, as I said, they're very flat. It's really easy for them to access the pollen and the nectar. The other reason that I'm sowing them is because we have got a very exciting project this year. So my son and daughter-in-law are going to be celebrating their wedding in our garden in the summer. And one of the reasons that I'm growing these umbellifers is because they are going for a very rustic feel, and we feel that these particular flowers are going to look very pretty as table decor. So if you're interested in what I'm going to be growing in order to provide some of the flowers and create a really nice atmosphere in the garden for this celebration, this wedding celebration, then another good reason to follow along this year, because I will be focusing quite a lot on that. Not on any of the other wedding prep, but just on the floral side of the wedding prep. So what I'm going to do now is show you what I'm using to do the seed sowing, and I'm going to show you how I sow each particular variety of seeds. I will talk over what I'm doing, so you'll get a view of what I'm doing whilst I'm doing it, but I will explain about each variety as I'm doing that, and hopefully this will be more beneficial rather than just watching me standing here talking about each variety. I will also go over how I'm going to grow these because I'm a little bit late to the party, it being the 6th of January today. So a lot of these I would ordinarily in past years have sown sooner, but I'm going to explain why it's perfectly fine to sow them now and they are still going to grow. There's plenty of time and I have every confidence. So if you'd like to sow these seeds now too, then you've got plenty of time. Or not plenty of time, but yeah, definitely get sowing now if you would like to sow along with me. So we're in my kitchen today. I do tend to do all my seed sowing in the kitchen because that way the wind doesn't catch the seeds as I'm sowing them. It's also bitterly cold at the moment outside. We had a couple of inches of snow yesterday. It has all melted, but it's still really cold. So I don't want to be outside. I'm going to be inside. But what I wanted to show you quickly before I start, in case you're new to the channel and you haven't seen, I sow into 8 cell trays. So they're quite deep. But they look like this, they're quite small. And the reason that I use 8 cell trays is because I'm not a flower farmer. I don't ever need more than 8 of anything. I'm just a home grower. If I did need more than 8, I would just sow more than these. But I find them so much more useful than the larger cell trays, which I found just broke so quickly over time, whereas these I've had for years. They're not necessarily any stronger, although I think, you know, I'm squeezing the top and it just doesn't bend as easily, but you can squeeze the bottoms like this to push your seed cell up. So that's really easy, but actually the tray itself is just much stronger than the larger green or black ones, which I just found I ended up binning, and it was wasteful and not good for the environment. So that's why I use these. I will link them in the description below, because a couple of people have asked me over the years what they are. So I have pre-filled all my seed trays with a multi-purpose compost. It's a peat-free multi-purpose compost, and if you're interested in why it's peat-free, there's a load of information online about why it's important to go peat-free. But it's to preserve the peat bogs, which helps our environment. They are so beneficial to our environment that we really should try not to use peat anymore. So the first things that I'm going to sow are the Ammi. So Ammi is the umbellifera that looks most like cow parsley, and I've got 4 different varieties today. So I'm sowing an Ammi Viziana called Casablanca, and then I'm sowing Ammi Majus Graceland, Queen of Africa, and then just plain old Ammi Majus. So I always put my tags in first. So I tag each of my trays before I do anything. I do write the date that I'm sowing the seed on the back of the tag, because that way I know whether I should carry on waiting for the seeds to germinate or whether to try re-sowing them. With all of these seeds, the children's seeds have been in the fridge for months, I think since before Christmas. This one I only bought recently. So this is, I've never bought from the National Trust, but these are new seeds that I found that are from the National Trust. Anyway, these haven't been in the fridge, so I'm going to see whether they germinate at the same time. Actually, that'll be quite interesting. That's not the reason, it's just that I wanted plain old Ammi Majus, and so I've only just got hold of the seeds. So the reason I had these in the fridge is because the Ammi does benefit from a period of chilling before you sow it. The other thing that you can do, and as I said, most people will already have sown their Ammi, the other thing you can do is to sow them earlier on in the winter, so sort of the very end of the autumn. If you sow them then the seeds will get, if you leave them outside, they will get the chilling required in order to germinate them. This chilling is called cold stratification, and it's where a variation in a period of warm and a period of cold and then a period of warm helps initiate the germination of the seeds. So it's kind of mimicking what nature will do. So I'm just going to try to only put a couple of seeds into each cell. I'm just sort of sprinkling them in like this. So the Ammi actually, on the seed packets, it says they're going to germinate between 16 and 18 degrees. They'll take about 2 weeks to germinate, but pre-chilling them is beneficial. And they should take between 65 and 75 days to reach maturity. So that means from germinating of the seed to actual flowering will be between 65 and 75 days. So with all of these, I'm just going to cover them in a sprinkling of vermiculite. And in case you haven't used vermiculite before, vermiculite's really good at inhibiting the growth of mold on the top of these cells. The other great thing about vermiculite is that it will let light in. So that's a light sprinkling. You can sort of see some of the compost still through the gaps. So this next lot of seeds that I'm sowing are called Daucus carota, which is wild carrot, and I'm sowing 3 different varieties. Well, I'm sowing the ordinary wild carrot, Daucus carota, but I'm also sowing a variety called Purple Kisses that I picked up today, and then another variety called Dara. And Dara I've sown in the past, and it's got these gorgeous darker purple blooms. Purple Kisses presumably is going to be very similar, but it says it's a mix, so presumably I might get some pink in with that too, hopefully. So these are exactly the same as Ammi. They are umbellifera flowers again. They grow to over 1 meter tall, and they're just a pinky purple colour as opposed to the white colour that you get with Ammi. So again, exactly the same as with the Ammi, pre-chill them if you can, put your seeds in the fridge for a couple of weeks or a few weeks, but if you haven't, then don't worry. If you leave them outside, they'll get the fluctuating temperatures that they require. They are going to need 16 to 18 degrees to germinate, and it'll take between 21 and 30 days for it to germinate. And then we'll get flowers from these between, well, about 80 days time after they've germinated. So these will flower after the Ammi have flowered, probably. The next seeds I'm sowing are Orlaya. These again have been in the fridge for at least a month. I absolutely love Orlaya. I think it's such a pretty umbellifer, and it really does remind me quite a lot of sort of the kind of thing that you would want at a wedding. The reason I've got two lots of Orlaya here, or two cell trays with Orlaya, is because I really want to test out. I collected seed last year and I want to test out whether I'm any good at collecting seed. So these ones I'm sowing here are from a seed company, and then the next tray are going to be seeds that I collected myself. I'm just going to see what the difference is. I'm really hoping that I'm, you know, a competent seed collector. So I'm going to press these down, make sure they've got good contact with the soil. And then these are seeds I collected myself in 2023. So these are older seeds. So I don't know whether these are going to be viable still, but I'm going to try. There's like no harm in trying. Orlaya are going to need light to germinate, so I am not covering these at all with vermiculite, and I'm hoping that my compost doesn't go mouldy and they germinate really quickly. I'm pressing them down so that they've got really good contact with the compost, and they germinate in 21 to 30 days. So the last seeds I'm sowing today aren't actually umbellifers at all, but they are seeds that I would ordinarily sow at a very similar time. So this is Lunaria, or Honesty, and it's the plant that creates the seeds. The seed heads create these little discs that are sort of mother of pearlish, and they're really, really pretty. And I love to grow these every year. And the ones that I did sow earlier on, I think I sowed some in September, every single one of those got eaten by slugs and snails because I left them in my cold frames. So with these, I am going to grow these indoors on my seed starting shelves and protect them from the slugs and snails until they're much bigger and more robust, and then they can go outside. Now, I don't know whether this is going to be successful, so don't necessarily follow my example unless you want to experiment and have loads of seeds. But I really, really do want these plants next year, particularly for the wedding. I'd really like to have the seed heads if they're available. I've got some that I dried from last year, so I do have some, but I would love to have more in the garden. So that's why I'm taking a risk and sowing more now, because I lost all the others. Okay, I've completely forgotten to record anything I did there. So I'm going to show you what I did just with an empty tray. So all I did with these particular seeds, because they're quite big, so they're very easy to handle, is I just laid them on the surface like this, and then I poked it just below the surface. So just plant them sort of 2 millimeters. It doesn't have to be precise, but just poke them a little bit below the surface. So that's what I did with all of these seeds. And then I put a sprinkling of vermiculite on top. So I always bottom water my seeds when I sow them, because if we water the top, then as you're watering them, it will dislodge all your carefully laid seeds. So just put them into a tray of water and they will absorb the water. The other reason that I really like vermiculite is because with vermiculite, it's very pale when it's dry, and then as soon as the surface is wet, it goes a dark colour, so you know when the water has reached the top of each seed tray. So that's another reason why I like to sprinkle vermiculite on the top. Okay, so I've sown all my seeds and they are all being bottom watered. Once I've done that, you're probably wondering where I'm going to keep them. Now, I don't want to put them in my cold frames, which is possibly the best place for them, or a greenhouse. I don't have a greenhouse. The greenhouses I have aren't insulated enough to protect them particularly well. So I'm not putting mine in the greenhouse, because also slugs and snails could get in there too. So all of these seeds I'm sowing today, I'm going to put on my seed starting shelves, which are indoors, where the slugs and the snails can't get them. Now, there are benefits and there are pros and cons to doing that. First of all, I'm going to have to keep an eye on the watering much more than I normally would, so I don't get loads of fungus gnats. Secondly, I need to use artificial lighting, so I use LED strip lighting for that. because obviously they're not going to get enough light inside in order to germinate. And then as soon as they've grown, the other con to growing your seeds, starting your seeds indoors, is that they're not acclimatized to the weather outside. So they then have to go through a process of being hardened off, which I can explain when I do that. So you can start your seeds anyway. You could start them on a kitchen windowsill if there's sufficient light. You could start them above a radiator near a window if there's sufficient light. They really do need to have enough light though. And at this time of the year in our hemisphere, where we're not near the equator and the daylight hours are very short, it is really important that they get enough light. Or just wait a month or two and start your seeds as the days get longer. And I'm going to be starting loads of seeds over the coming months. In the next 3 months, January, February and March, I sow a lot of seeds, and I'll bring you along for all of that. So as I said before, if you'd like to see how I do everything, then do subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell, then you'll be notified every time I post a new video. So I really hope you've had fun with me as I sowed these seeds today. You do still have time to sow them if you'd like to sow them yourself. Certainly if you're going to put them outside or you want to use the milk jug method or something like that, you have got time to sow all of these seeds. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.